Today we will have an extension for the lecture with Nadav, and we will go over how to plug a texture map from Substance Painter into Arnold and how to render and all the things that relate to this. So first thing, we will open Substance and we'll export the texture and go over how to export it. So here we are in Substance Painter, and I open the file of the dragon, and now I would like to export the textures. So I go to File, Export Textures, and you can see I got this dialog window, and on the left you can see I have the texture set names, and I can decide what texture I want to export. And on the right I have the resolutions. I can select individual resolutions, and up here is the configuration. So let's look at the configuration and see how I created my configuration. So I started with Arnold 5 standard because this is what I'm using to render. Duplicate, and I will rename it. Now you can see I have a $ mesh, a $ texture set. Now the name of the mesh is I'm not interested. All I'm interested is to know what is the texture set, so I will know to what object I should connect the texture maps. So let's delete the $ mesh. And I will also delete the emissive and the height, since I'm not using them in this case. Okay, so now we have the configuration. We can go back to the export slot, and let's select the configuration that we just created. Let's go and see where we saved it. So this will be the directory where the file will go. I will make a new folder, and select it. And now all I have left is to export. This is my the folder that I export to. And you can see that the names of the files are correlating with the texture sets. So now after we export the textures from Substance, let's open up Maya, and I have here the file of the dragon, and it has only one material, one Arnold default material. Off camera I copied all my textures to my project. So let's start and plug the texture maps into my material. But first I would like to make some changes just so my work would be a bit easier. So I would go to Arnold render window, and I would put it next to my working area, and I would also modify a bit of my 4 views window. Here I would leave the perspective, but here I would put my hypershade. So usually you come to hypershade by clicking here, but I would like to make it a bit more comfortable. So I would go here to the hypershade, and you see I can get the hypershade here. Down here I would put the camera Nadav created, and I have another window in case I would like to create my own camera just for testing of the material. So let's jump into creating and plugging texture maps. So I'll select the body, the main body, and assign new material. Let's go to Arnold shader and standard surface. Now while the body is selected, I'm going to the hypershade, and just to know what material is plugged to my object, I can click down here and it shows me the material that it's connected. Okay, so right now I have a standard surface. Nothing is plugged, but I will start plugging my texture. Let's go on textures and let's start with the body. Let's select all the files of the body and let's drag them into Maya. So now I exported all my files, and let's see how we are going to plug them. Okay, so you can see I have a color, metalness, which is not usable in this case, normal, roughness, and specular gloss. So we have two ways to plug texture maps. I'll just bring it a bit. Okay, so one way is to go to the material to find the slot that we want to plug, and then to just middle mouse click and drag it on top. So now we connected the column. Let's go down and connect the specular. So we can do it in the same way, but we are connecting it to the weight. And let's connect the roughness to the roughness. And the last one, metalness, we will not use. The last one is the normals. So let's go down to geometry, middle mouse, and connect it to the bump map. Now this is not supposed to be a bump, it's a normal map, so let's change it. And let's make a test render. We finished the render. Let's save the preview. It's already looking quite okay. We start to get the materials. But let's just go over all the files and make sure that everything has the right color space. So in this case, it's correct here. The color should be sRGB. Specular gloss, however, should be raw. The same for roughness. And it should be alpha is luminous, both of them. And let's do the same to the normal. Let's put it on raw. Okay, let's render it again. It finished to render, and we created a preview, and you can see the difference between both of them. Okay, so we are quite there. We have a few more things that we can add, but the textures are plugged. Just one thing, if we would have any metalness, we will plug the metalness right here as a map, but for now we don't need to do it. Now I would like to go a little bit closer to test my materials a bit better. So let's find some interesting angle. Let's change the perspective. So we can see that for the most part it looks quite okay. So now let's add some control to our material. Okay, and before, let's look a little bit of how we are plugging the materials from the node base perspective. So in the node we have two outputs, the alpha and the color. Now the color contains R, G and B, and the alpha is only one channel. Okay? In the material we have in red it's our channels that have RGB input, and in green they have only one input. Okay, so let's add some control. For the color, I would leave it as it is. You can also do the same way, also control the color, but let's focus on the specular gloss and the roughness. Now we can always take the texture files and change them in a program like Photoshop, make them brighter, contrast and all of those things, but we can also do it inside of Maya, and I like to add to my scene a simple controller. So let's start with the specular. Okay, so the specular, we will press tab and we will look for add, and you can see here AI add, and this is making making our file a bit more brighter, so we can control the brightness of the file. But you can see that the specular is getting only one input, but the output here are RGB. So the way we will do it, we will plug the alpha into one of those inputs, and for the same input, if we selected R, then the same one would be connected to the specular. And now you can see nothing actually changed. You can see that nothing actually changed here for the moment, but we can make it more specular. Now the similar but opposite thing we will do with the roughness, and with the roughness we would like to reduce the roughness. So I would press tab and I will look for multiply, AI multiply, and we'll do exactly the same process from the alpha to the red, and then from the red to the roughness. Now you can see that I actually crank down the roughness, so we can get much glossier. Now these two sliders give me a little bit of control over the texture that I'm getting from Substance. So now we have the material, we have full control. We can adjust it as we like. I will not go right now to adjust it, but we are missing one thing, which is subsurface scatter. Subsurface scattering is simulating the light that penetrates through object and scatter behind the surface. And the most obvious example that we know is human face. When we get light from behind, you can see what happened around the ears, but we can see it also in wax and in rubber, and we can go through all this literature, but basically a lot of material have subsurface scattered, and definitely Skin of a Dragon would have it. So let's see how we are going to create our subsurface scatter. In order to make the subsurface work for our benefit, what we will do is we'll take the same file that we plug to the specular and we will plug it to the subsurface. Now at first doesn't look so great because we need to do a few more things. Let's take the color output and put it in the subsurface color. So basically we got more or less back to where we were, but you can see that it's scattering a little bit of white. Let's let it render so we can see the difference. Finished render. So let's see the difference. This is without subsurface and this is with subsurface. So you can see that right now what it's scattering is a little bit whiteness, and this is not exactly the look that we are looking for, and this is because we have one more thing to do, and two more things to do, sorry, one more things to plug and another slider to play with. Okay, so we have the radius, and in the radius we need to kind of give the under color. So in this case I would do it to the red. Now the way I will do it is that I would like to use my colors and then plug them with a tint of red into the radius. So the way I will do it is I will again do multiply, so tab, AI multiply, okay, and we are going to do very similar procedure. So we take the color, we'll put it on the input too, and we will connect to the radius. Okay, so here you can see it's in the radius, but right now we didn't change anything. Let's make it a little bit more to the red, so I'm going from HSV to RGB, and let's do it 1 for the red, 0.35 to the green, and 0.2. Okay, so we got some kind of a reddish color, which you can always later on modify according to what you want. Now if we'll take a render, we will see the difference. Okay, so let's see what we got. This is where we started with a white subsurface, and this is with the red. So we're already getting much better result. Now the other things that we should change probably is the scale. Okay, so how much it goes. So I will try to put it maybe probably around 2, and the best way to see the result, or to see the effect actually of the, let me just uncheck all those lights. So window, rendering editor, then light editor. Yeah, so I need to keep only this one, so I will just uncheck those. So now I have only one light from the back. Okay, and let's see if now we got, so now we need to see this kind of effect that of the subsurface. Let's maybe increase the light just for the effect. You can obviously see that in the thinner areas the light is passing through, and in the thicker area less light is passing through. So we already know that we got this effect that we want, which is the subsurface. We can of course go back to the material and modify it, maybe the scale, the color of the radius and so on, but I will leave it like this since I think it's quite decent. And let's move to the next step, and let me bring back my light. Okay, so we have back the light, and as you can see we have here one little issue. The nails should have different materials properties than the skin. Now one way to do it is to go and select faces exactly and to apply a different material to those faces, but because in this case it doesn't really go with the faces, what we did, we created a map, black and white map, and this map will help us to split two different materials on one object. So let's see how we are going to do it. Shader. So let's go and create a layer shader, and as you can see this is our node of layer shader. And you can see first we have only one layer enabled, but we can enable up to 8 layers. Now in each layer we can actually input the whole material, not only a texture map. And as high as the number, it means that the layer is on the top. So layer 2 will cover layer 1. And that's why we have the mix. And in mix we can plug, we can either decide how much to mix them by a number, or we can put a map, black and white map, that will define the mix. Okay, so the second thing we need is another material. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the whole network of my material, edit, duplicate shading network. Okay, so now I have another material which has the same properties and the same maps and everything. I'll call it bone. Okay, so the way we created the map is that the material of the skin needs to be in layer 1 and the material of the bone needs to be in layer 2. So let's just do it with middle mouse. Inside of the input, let's enable layer 2 and middle mouse to the input. And now, very important, we need to assign this new layer shader to our object. Okay, so I select the object, right click, assign material. Okay, so for now we should not see any difference. It should look exactly the same because we use exactly the same material. We don't have any difference in properties. Now that we plugged both of the materials to the layer shader and we plug the shader to the object, we can define with the alpha where do we want to show the nails or the bone and where we want to show the skin. So let me show you the file. This is the alpha file, and you can see the white spots are actually where the nails are. And this mix, what it does, it takes what is white it shows and what is black it hides. Okay, so let's plug this file. Now that we have the mask, we can start manipulate the material and actually affect only the nails. Okay, so this is my bone, and I will just to test the material, I will just try to change a few things. So this is how I created all the materials for the whole dragon. You might also notice that because we put a layer shader, even when we press 6 to show material, we will not see the material. You can see that the skin is got the bone and the skin, and they are both connected to a layer shader with an alpha. The same is for the head and the jaw. The two are getting just one material, and as you can see, we still have in the tooth also. We put inside subsurface. The platform got material without subsurface because it's rocks and grass, and probably not the best addition.